All right. Good morning. My name is Mason West, and I am the president of the Illinois chapter of the National Association of Black Physical Therapists, or the NABPT, bringing you what I believe will be a great discussion. But first, what is the NABPT? Their mission, our mission, is to be a catalyst for change and inclusion, to encourage and promote visibility in professional associations and leadership positions in the physical therapy field. We want to compile a national directory of Black physical therapists and other Black healthcare providers to enhance mentorship opportunities, networking, community service opportunities, and referrals, catalyze career development for Black healthcare workers, specifically physical therapists, and to promote the increased recruitment and retention of Black healthcare workers, applicants into programs. Today, I am joined by the one and only Andre Tucker, where we will be discussing his path to being the head athletic trainer of the Chicago Bears with a diversity, equity, and inclusion flair to it. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I hope you're well also.
Yeah, doing great. So just a little brief background on Andre here. Spent the last 4 years in his current role, starting back in February of 2018. Spent time with Cleveland Browns, Atlanta Falcons, Jacksonville Jaguars, and has 14 years of NFL athletic training experience. That's a lot. Obtained his Bachelor of Science degree in athletic training from Florida International University in 2000, and then got his master's degree in sports management in 2003. He's also a member of the Professional Football Athletic Training Society, National Athletic Training Association, and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist and National Academy of Sports Medicine Performance Enhancement Specialist. Man, that is a great list to have on your resume. So first and foremost, walk us through kind of what's a typical day for you. Not a lot of people know what a head athletic trainer does.
Yeah, so I'll kind of break it up in calendar year. So usually in January, we have our postseason, rehabs or any potential surgeries that arise from, any injuries that were sustained during or after the season. February, mid-February, we typically start preparing for the combine. This is where the top invite is sent to the top, usually 333 players to attend a national scouting and physical. This year it was done in Indianapolis. So we're pretty instrumental in that. If you can imagine all 330 plus players that come through the combine are actually seen by all 32 teams. So over the course of 4 days, we'll see all the players that were invited. I think this year it was about 333 players. From that, we gather medical information, we give everybody a grade, and then we start compiling and preparing for the NFL draft, which typically takes place at the end of April. March for us, actually this week, we'll start beginning free agency. So this is where our roster starts to shape and mold. We're involved in that, obviously, from a physical standpoint, making sure these players are going to be ready and available based on if they have any current or previous medical history. So that's kind of the busy part of March for us. We're going to start our off-season training in April. So typically from April to about middle of June, it consists of conditioning, strength work, on-field activities. So that could be practice or just working with coaches. Players will start to meet a little bit. And then we usually end our off-season program middle of June with a veteran mini camp. From there, you have about 6 weeks to prepare for training camp. We usually try to get some downtime before the madness starts. And training camp for us takes place usually the third week of July. So from July till when the season ends, you're pretty much on the grind, preparing for the season. So regular season usually takes place from September till we've added a 17th game. So it takes us probably about the second week of January. So that captures a calendar month from a year standpoint in what we do.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to the combine this year and do a little coverage on it. And I mean, that was exhausting just interviewing people. So I can't imagine doing what you're doing through that whole process. So props to you and the entire staff that the Bears have put together there. As previously mentioned, you attended Florida International University. What was your school diversity like?
Yeah, so I always tell people when describing Florida International, it truly is international. I would sometimes make the joke and say it's the Baskin Robbins of diversity. I met so many different people from so many different countries and backgrounds. So I thoroughly enjoyed my time at FIU because it exposed me to a lot of various cultures and backgrounds.
Through your college experience, did you ever feel out of place, or did you ever feel like you didn't belong in certain spaces, especially as you're trying to progress into that healthcare field where there isn't a lot of diversity, and a lot of times, like maybe the classes you're taking or some of the opportunities you're grabbing, you may not see someone necessarily that looks, talks, has the same experiences as you.
Yeah, I would say so. For me, the challenge was I pretty much knew early on I wanted to work professional sports. So the way I'm kind of driven, who can I emulate? Who is currently in that position I'm striving for? And that's where I struggled. There wasn't a lot of individuals that looked like me or maybe had the same background or upbringing that I can kind of lean on. The one person I can say I looked up to just initially in my early part of my career was Ronnie Barnes. He's a head athletic trainer, longtime head athletic trainer for the New York Giants. He was I call him the Godfather. He's been doing it since I've been in the profession. So looking at him, knowing that, hey, there is an opportunity for someone that looks like me to have a chance to be at the top of my profession, that definitely gave me, hope. I struggled at times because you always hear the cliche, you got to hire the one individual or one minority. And I feel like at times, and I remember having this conversation with one of my professors, I said, I don't want to be given an opportunity because of what I look like. I want to be given an opportunity because I deserve to be there. And her answer to me was, use your background, the way you look to get you in the door, but your work ethic, your morals, your values, and what you're passionate about will keep you there. So that was years ago I've heard that, and I still hold that near and dear to my heart because it's true. No one wants to be picked just because of who they are, what they look like. You want to feel like you earn that position and you're keeping that position because you deserve it.
Absolutely. I mean, couldn't said it better myself. And I know have had similar conversations and hold that true to my as well. Today, there seems to be a bigger push for some historically Black colleges, universities, where they're talking about recruits going there for sports, or honestly, as we're talking about this healthcare field. Was that something you considered attending an HBCU when applying for schools? And today, would that be any different for you, or do you think you would go the route you did?
You know what? I wouldn't change. So I know we talked about, so initially my first 2 years, I started at a small school named Chowan University. It was in Murfreesboro, North Carolina. And I loved those first 2 years because it was a smaller school. And with smaller schools, you don't have a lot of hands. So I got exposed to a ton my first 2 years before transferring. Florida is home for me. So the reason I ended up picking Florida International, it was closer to home, closer to my mom, just closer to family. The distance between living in North Carolina and having to go home during break, it got old after my sophomore year. So I transferred. But I would say the first 2 years, if you were going to ask me what would I ask or recommend students to do, go to this school that's going to give you the most opportunity and experience to grow. Doesn't have to be HBC, doesn't have to be the powerhouse, football programs. It's got to be right for you and what you can handle. Some people like being thrown in the fire. Some people need to be kind of eased in. So I think you got to be comfortable with the program you're going to be entering in, because that's where you're ultimately going to grow.
That's awesome. The pre-health field sometimes can be referred to as, survival of the fittest, weeding people out. How much of that affects the statistics of African Americans in white codes in healthcare professions, and what are some ways to get through that weeding out process when you may feel like maybe you weren't given the tools to do so?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked me this question because it's something I try to instill in our internship program here. I think we have to teach our young individuals and people coming up in the profession how to network, right? In school, you're going to learn the book stuff, how to tape, how to evaluate. I think it's being able to hold conversations, being able to be comfortable getting to know each people and networking. Because this is I just finished my 18th season in the league, getting ready to start my 19th. I can tell you hands down, it's the relationships that you build throughout your career, both personal and professional. The longer I do this, the smaller the world gets. So you never know when you're going to need that individual, whether it's someone you may not even directly work with. Just being able to have these conversations and feel comfortable talking. I struggle now sometimes with my players, like they're always on their phone. And I try to teach my children, like the art of having conversation is becoming extinct. I think the more we can train our young professionals to be comfortable just walking up to an individual you may not know and getting to know them, because some form or fashion you may need them down the road and you don't know until you start that process. So I would say, the structure and the education is already in place. It's what isn't in the textbooks that we can teach these individuals to make them more successful. And I would say the biggest nugget right now is networking, being able to be social and getting yourself and putting yourself out there, because that's the only way you're going to get these opportunities. And when you do get the opportunity, you got to maximize it. At this level, it's super hard to get to the professional level. If you think about it, there's only 32 head athletic trainers in the NFL, and that's in the world, right? It's pretty fascinating to think how hard it's, and a little bit of luck to get to where you need to, but you got to put the effort and the work in, and a lot of that will come with networking, because you're going to get the schooling. So that's an automatic. I don't think the schools teach you enough how to network and how to be social.
I couldn't have said that better myself. I know an example comes to mind. A couple months ago, went into a doctor's office, myself and my clinic manager. He's white, I'm black, and I shook, handshake, all that stuff. But then the rest of the time, that doc that we were talking to was laser focused talking to my clinic manager, and he was actually kind of surprised. It seemed like that I was a physical therapist and had a doctorate. So off of that, if a scenario like that were to present itself to some of these young individuals watching this, what are some tips you would tell them to be able to, close that gap, to be able to put themselves in that conversation a little easier and show like, hey, I'm in this conversation too, and I'm here to, treat your patients, or, that I deserve your thoughts, your business, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think based on the conversation and the dialogue, you find your way to insert yourself and show your value and your worth. So if it's talking about an exam, he may say, hey, the range of motion, let whatever the conversation is, say, well, based on what I've seen, I think actually this is what's going on because I've been working with it. And then that lets the doctor know that you're comfortable being in that conversation, you're well-versed and educated to be a part of the conversation. And then that he knows that you belong, right? So I think it's feeling comfortable enough in your skin that when it's time to shine and you're in a situation where you can display your talent, I think you have to do that. That's the only way people are going to know. Otherwise, we as human beings, black, white, green, yellow, we all have perceptions of people. And if you don't break those barriers down for however you need to, then you leave it to other people. And I'm a firm believer. If you think you're in a room and you belong, you need to be able to display that.
I know. So do you ever feel like there's a competition ever, and when it comes to networking, when it comes to these opportunities? Because as you said, there's only 32 head athletic trainer jobs, period. Now add on to that, that there is a limited number. For example, with physical therapists, there's only about 5% that are of Black descent. Do you feel like there's a competition between Black men and women to find these jobs in healthcare? Or do you think there is truly more of a community uplifting bond there?
I think it's both, right? Because it depends on the individual. Some individuals are strong enough where competition doesn't scare them, where other individuals shy away from it. So then that can be some hesitancy and almost sometimes jealousy, because if you have a dominant alpha in the room and they're going for it, a go-getter, that can be perceived as someone that's, a suck up or a negative connotation. So I think it comes with finding an inner peace in yourself that you're comfortable in your role, and how can you display it without being threatening to the group or the team. You know, I think naturally, if it's meant to be, you're going to stand out, you're going to shine. So you don't, it's a delicate balance. And I think it's knowing the people that you're around and who you're working with. But it's ultimately, yes, it is a competition. So you have to skillfully figure out how to compete without overdoing it, because sometimes, depending upon the situation, it can be looked at in a negative light. But yes, I would say it's a competition, but there also is uplifting as well. So I think we also need to continue to support each other, but realize at the end of the day, it might be down to you or me, but that's okay, right? That's part of it. That's the reason we're both going for that same position. But hey, I get it. You congratulate me, or you get it. I congratulate you and you support you, because you know what? How small this world is. One day, let's say, for example, we're both athletic trainers. I get the head job, you don't. There's a good chance you might get the head job with another team, and I might need you to hire me because I'm no longer the head of, like, that's how the world works. And I've seen it so many times. So just because you don't get it, you still need to be uplifting and supportive, because people that one day are in a position to help are going to remember how you handled the situation when it didn't go your way.
Absolutely. That's a great point. There was when I was doing some background research on you, there was an article written by Larry Mayer, one of the Chicago Bears writers, and you noted that you became a U.S. citizen in your mid-20s, but that I'll always be Jamaican by blood. Has there been times where maintaining your Jamaican identity was difficult? And what would you say to a young individual struggling maintaining that identity as they navigate a world that often pushes back on it?
Yeah, no, I actually love that you asked that question, because something I've been sharing a lot recently. So being born in Jamaica, I left when I was 7. When I first moved to the States, in the islands, there's no white, black, green, you don't necessarily identify with a group, you identify with your nationality. So if you ask most people outside of the US, where are you from or what is your background, they don't say I'm black or white. It's I'm Jamaican, I'm South African, I'm English. So that was an adjustment for me, that I had to fit a mold of either I was African American or not, right? I look at myself as I'm Jamaican, right? So that was an adjustment for me. Having an accent initially was an adjustment because people couldn't understand what I was saying. So I kind of had to mold myself to kind of fit in, if that makes sense. And I think that was part of the struggle and why I waited so long to become a citizen, because I almost felt like I was losing part of me. So if people were probably wondering why'd you wait so long, that kind of gives you the backstory. But yeah, I would say there was a struggle initially because it was just an adjustment. I was coming from a totally different country, and finding my way and how to belong. So, and it taught me actually how to adapt, right? Not lose yourself, but how to adapt. Because in this world, you have to be able to do that to survive.
Oh, absolutely. Adaptability is one of the most important traits, I feel like, when it comes to a field like
Mhm.
this.
Yes.
Uh, in that same article, you talked about your first experience with the Dolphins, where you were setting up a field, filling water bottles, putting Gatorade bottles in coolers, and went on to say, believe it or not, my first day, I was like, you know what, this ain't for me. This is way too much work. I'm going back to college, but I'm not a quitter. I had a chance to check myself and say, you know what, it's the first day, give it a chance, a little overwhelming, but you have to get a routine and hopefully things will get a little bit more manageable. Not all individuals have that same intrinsic motivation that you showed in that moment. So, what would you say to someone like that who had this opportunity and maybe was struggling a little bit to find that inner motivation?
Yeah. So what I've also taught myself through experiences is never make a decision, a one that's emotional, right? So if you're in the heat of the moment, which I was during that day, I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was just frustrating, overwhelming, and I had all sorts of emotions going through my mind. And initially, what you tell yourself is, I'm going to go back to what's easy and what's comfortable, which was to go back to college and work in a routine that I've been doing for 4+ years. So I let myself calm down. I finished the work. I slept, prayed about it. And the next day I just said, you know what? I'm not ready to give up. And I do that to this day. Like if there's something that frustrates me, or I feel like I'm getting upset about something, I just take a deep breath, I remove myself from the situation, and I think it through. And once I have a clear head, then I go with my gut. Because initially I've seen it so many times, whether it's me or other individuals, you get mad, you get upset, you act however you act while in the heat of the moment, and 90% of the time you regret that decision because you weren't thinking clearly. So I think the big thing is for me, or to share, is when you're in a frustrating moment, just don't make a career life changing decision. Just just get through the moment, think about it once you're calm, and then go from there. But yeah, it's got to be, to get to the level that I had to get to, I know I had to be able to be an intrinsic motivator for sure. Because you're not going to have people say, it's okay, Andre, keep going. You're going to be okay. You got to have those moments where you're going to pick yourself up. Because a lot of times you're by yourself when you have to make those decisions.
So, in your opinion, you mentioned the networking as one of the things, but what are some of the main ways that we can increase Black men, women, and just minorities in general in the healthcare field?
Yes, I think it's through education, right? If there's a certain population, or we're trying to, make our fields a little bit more popular or aware, I think it's finding ways to educate, to get content out. There's probably still folks out there that don't know what athletic trainers do or physical therapists do, or what the difference is. I still get to this day, oh, so you train athletes? I'm like, no. Oh, you're the water boy. You're the person that runs on. And I'm like, no, you're way more than that. But instead of getting upset or offended, that's an opportunity for me to grow the profession and share what we do. And then you explain, they're like, wow, I had no idea you did all that. And then to me, it becomes a domino effect, word of mouth. You share that with an individual that didn't know what you did. Now, when they get asked or it comes up again, they're able to explain it. So I think for me, whenever you want to get something out, whether it's a new modality or new machine or new technique, it's education and awareness and finding the stakeholders that can get that out. So for us, it's, if I have a new machine or new whatever I want to introduce to our athletic training program, I'll identify individuals, whether it's management or players, that are influential, that can help get my message out. So I think that's how we grow the profession, and that's how we get it out to more minorities.
Do you feel that because of your background and potentially experiences, things like that, that you can connect with some of these players easier than maybe someone who doesn't have that, right? Because it's not a secret, right? A lot of the NFL, it's a heavily Black sport. Does that help you in any way, shape, or form? Or do you feel like it's the same with a lot of the other athletic trainers that are in this league who may not be that may not have those backgrounds?
I think it helps 100%. We're human beings at the end of the day, and typically you gravitate to people that look like you. So yes, for sure, I think that helps, especially with the initial conversations. You're comfortable, or it's not a comfortable situation, you're going to tend to go to the people that you feel most comfortable with until you learn the other individuals. So I think for sure it does make a difference, because people like to gravitate to people that look like them.
And the Bears themselves have really been on the forefront, it seems like, of a lot of these DEI efforts. Tanisha Wade was obviously a big part of the search for GM and coach, which was huge. What was your experience at Alice Hall in terms of what the Bears have been doing, and how have you felt these DEI efforts have been going as a whole?
Yeah, no, I love what we're doing. So when I first started here, I was welcomed. You feel like you're part of the family. And I think, we need to commend management, especially George McCaskey, for opening up the dialogue, for allowing the opportunity for us to grow in that area, because I think it's absolutely crucial, and it's paid off. I mean, our minority candidates or employees have grown. And it's, like I said, it's good to see other individuals that look like you, but also individuals that look like others. So the more you make the playing field even, I think it just becomes a beautiful thing, because you feel like you're part of something that's not necessarily going on outside the normal world. So it's good to have that for sure. I think it's awesome that we're doing it.
So you were pretty instrumental in keeping the Bears as COVID free as possible in this new world we're living in. And as the organization's infection control officer, former Bears GM Ryan Pace went as far as saying that hopefully you guys see how fortunate we are to have Andre as our head trainer, because he said you were a rock through the whole process. How difficult was it for you to wear both hats the last few years? And what does that say about the Bears in general that they trust you with a process like this?
Sure. So obviously I'm indebted and grateful that they thought, I would do a good job in helping and maintaining these protocols. And I would say hands down, it was one of the hardest things I've done to date. If you think about it, and had no idea what I was signing up for. If you think about it, I was essentially deemed or responsible for having two full-time jobs, with all the COVID protocols being put in place, with the height of the pandemic, and still having to use my job, which is why I was here, is to oversee all the medical care. It's kudos to us having a family environment. Yes, I may have been the forefront or the voice of it all, but I certainly had a ton of support. And there was no way I'd be able to do it without the backing of the organization and the individuals that helped us on the ground level. So kudos to my staff, kudos to our operations. I mean, any and everybody, was all hands on deck, and that was the only way we were going to be able to get to it, because it certainly was a big undertaking. So, I'm fortunate they trusted me to do that, but it was a unique experience.
Yeah, I can't even imagine doing that. Just juggling, trying to COVID in a clinic, just simply how we have that, where we'll have at most 6 to 8 people in there, was tough. So doing that for an entire professional organization, hats off to you.
Thank you.
If you, from when you decided I'm going to be an athletic trainer to the day that it was announced, hey, you are the head athletic trainer of the Chicago Bears, what would you say was the hardest part of that journey?
So initially, believe it or not, I had no idea what I wanted to do from profession. Played basketball growing up. I knew I wasn't going to be Michael Jordan, so I needed to figure out life. And I said, all right, I'm going to focus on school. I'd heard about athletic training, but didn't know a ton about it. So my professor at the time said, hey, what are you passionate about? I said, I love sports and I love to help people. She said, okay, what about athletic training? So obviously the rest is history. Here I am now. But I would say through my profession, I was moving up at a pretty steady rate. As you can see, I spent a couple of years in Jacksonville. At that point, I was an entry-level athletic trainer. I knew if I wanted to move up, I was going to have to move on to another team. That's how I ended up with the Falcons. And then once again, networking. So the individual I worked with in Cleveland, he and I were assistants together in Jacksonville. So he became the head athletic trainer for Cleveland Browns. He then brought me on board, and we worked together for 8+ years in Cleveland. I'd say the hardest part was, as I moved up, the opportunities got smaller and smaller, so or not as frequent. So I had to just once again check myself and say, hey, while I'm waiting for that opportunity, what could I do to be prepared, fully prepared as much as possible for when I do get that call to be the head athletic trainer for an NFL team. So, humbling moments. I interviewed with teams, didn't get it. Wasn't the right time or the right situation, but it made me reflect on, hey, maybe I just wasn't ready or the opportunity wasn't right. So what can I do individually to make sure that when it does happen, I'm fully prepared to sit in this chair?
And what were some of those things that you felt like you did to, bridge the gap from one interview to the next, and make yourself the candidate that ultimately got the position you did?
Yeah, so as in Cleveland, I think the first 4 years I was the assistant athletic trainer. Then the last 4 years I was named assistant head. So on paper it looks good because I had a little bit more responsibility. And like I said, the gentleman I worked with in Cleveland, he gave me the opportunity to be the head without being the official head, if that made sense. So it gave me opportunities to lead, to guide, to run the department. So when I had the opportunity to run my own show, I was already doing it. So for me, that really helped. Because initially when you start a job and you're the director, there's a ton that you're taking on. And the parts of the day-to-day operations for me wasn't overwhelming because I'd been doing it for 3+ years. It was more so getting down and the responsibilities of things that I just don't know and couldn't prepare for until you're sitting in this chair. So if you know your end game, your question is, or the challenge for you would be, what do I need to do to prepare for when I am there? I'm fully ready. Because what you don't want is to be scrambling. Obviously, some of that's inevitable, but to be scrambling while you're in this new role.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned a lot over the last year or so is to ask for what you want, not wait for it to come to you, right? Because a lot of times it just simply won't. So to say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I need. And if people care about you, they will give you those opportunities.
100%. And the challenge is, which kudos to you, is knowing what do you want. When you ask some individuals, they have no idea, and they're hoping as they're navigating through life in their career that it smacks them in the face. And you and I could probably say that doesn't always happen, and it's probably rare. You just have to have a vision and where you want to go, how you plan to get there, and then execute it. And executing it is leaning on folks that can help you get there.
If you could go back and tell 18-year-old Andre anything, what would it be?
So I'd tell myself, because believe it or not, you probably can't tell in this conversation, I was very shy, introvert, didn't talk. And I would say, put yourself out there more. And then within these experiences, try to maximize what you're trying to get out of it. How many times have we heard, hey, when you're in this class, take really good notes. When you're at this conference, ask questions. And then we don't. We look back and we say, man, I wish I'd asked that question. Or man, I wish I put a little bit more whatever into this situation. So easier said than done, but if you can always keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through stuff, just maximize the effort and just jump in, because you never know what that opportunity or what door may open. So
got a little thing popped up in the chat from Latham Williams. If you know your end game, you need to prepare now to be absolutely ready for when your time comes. Quote by Andre Tucker. I think that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's super, because that'll help you. If you know your why, I think that helps you navigate how to get there. If you don't know your why, you're going to struggle to find your end game, because you're not answering the big question, which is the why. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. So unless any questions pop up in the chat, I want to thank you, Andre, for taking the time out of your day to join me and have this discussion. I personally felt it was very enlightening and truly helps those coming up to see someone who created a path to such heights. Because as you talked about earlier, I know as for me for physical therapy, I didn't see that person that looked like me in the role that I wanted to be. So to be able to be one of the, I feel like, pioneers to get to where you're at, that's something that helps motivate me. It doesn't matter that physical therapy versus athletic training, there's so much that crosses over. And, again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you popping on here. Is there anything else you want to say before I let you go and do your very hectic, very important job?
Yeah, so it's something else I kind of challenge everyone on this call, including the two of us, is give back, right? You got to where you are because someone gave you an opportunity. So dude, share that knowledge, have those conversations, be a mentor. Like, I love doing stuff like this because I didn't get here by myself. I got here by having these types of conversations. And if we can help individuals not stumble like we did, why not, right? And part of that is sharing the knowledge, sharing the experience, and just giving back when you can.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm going to let you run, and I can't wait to cross paths with you. I thought I was going to see you at the combine, but I think I missed you by a little bit. Again, you were probably too busy, but hopefully we get to run into each other in the near future.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And seriously, thank you for having me. This was fun. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, you too.